For our last talk of the morning, it's a real privilege to introduce Dr. Misty Humphries from UC Davis. She's going to be talking to us on all things money related. So Misty, go ahead and take it away.
So a lot of people have touched on a few topics here. And as I started kind of going through and looking at all the different topics, what I realized was that I was either going to make 40 slides or I was going to make 3 slides. So what I did was I went ahead and just made a couple of slides. And Pete, I can't advance it. So if you'll go to the next slide, that would be great. When you think about all things money, really what we were talking about here is how do you get adequate funding? What do you pay for? And what does unionization? These were the things I was tasked with. And when you think about your funding and adequate funding for your spots or building into new spots, this is so institution, state, and program specific that it really requires you to work within your group. For instance, there are a certain number of GME spots, as Kelly alluded to earlier, that are paid for by Medicare. The number of these has changed and does continue to flux. And as programs such as pediatrics or internal medicine within your specific institution change their number of spots, how your spots are funded can be also influenced and can be changed. And specifically, if you have a number of spots that are funded through the Medicare funding line, for instance, we have 5 spots a year. We have 3 of those spots that are through that funding. Other spots are paid for by the dean's office, which funds a few spots. And then a number of other spots are funded through a statewide consortium that is looking to increase the number of people in GME. In addition, that's also something that in Michigan, they have a consortium that is increasing funding. So when you talk about how to do your funding or how to fund different spots or add into new spots, I encourage you to start by working with other program directors within your department. So for us, we have, within our department, we have a CT residency, a general surgery residency, and a plastics residency. And each of us wants to add in research spots. So we went to our department chair and asked for this. And she began negotiating with the hospital to get the hospital to cover spots. But the GME office also had some funding. And like I said, this is really institutional specific. So using resources within your institution, specifically other program directors, can help you leverage with your group, with your vice chair of education, or with your department of surgery faculty. And Pete, maybe you can go to the next slide. Thank you. So private hospitals and partnerships are also another great idea. So a lot of times we have private hospitals that say, we'd love to have a resident come out to our program and we'd love to work with them. And then you tell them how much it's going to cost to have a resident come out and work with them. And that's whenever their group may say, well, maybe we don't want to do this. But what we have been able to negotiate, and some other places have too, is that having a resident come out and work with faculty or be in that particular environment is cheaper than having an APP at some institutions. And so these faculty have been able to, again, go to their private institutions and negotiate with, for instance, one of our hospitals here is, we have a Kaiser facilities, we have Sutter facilities, and both of those groups coordinated with us to pay for a resident coming to work with them versus having to have an APP purchased or hired on. In addition, the VA is a great institution. If you do have a VA that is associated with your hospital, or if you can associate with them, they have a strong dedication to funding graduate medical education. And we have 1 spot for us, and we're going to add on an additional spot, and the VA is helping us pay for that. And the VA is also a great place for training. It's a little bit slower paced a lot of times, and the residents have more time to do training that is kind of based for them. So when whatever state you are in, whatever resources you have at your institution, you really have to kind of capitalize them and then start negotiating, depending on if your department chair can negotiate with the hospital, or if you can negotiate as a program director with GME. All of those are potential options. For the next slide, it basically talks about, what do you pay for? This is a little bit tricky, and this is going to tag into my last slide, which is coming up, which is about the unionization. But other funds, because residents want a little bit of everything. And when they go out and interview, they'll be told at one institution, we pay for books, we pay for loops, we'll get you a headlight, we pay for all of these things. And sometimes that lure will bring them to certain institutions. In addition, it's also, this is where talking to your other programs is important. In some programs, there is a stipulation that they will not fund things such as loops. So our general surgery program does not pay for loops within the Department of Surgery, which then whenever we brought in our residents, we were told that we could not purchase loops for our residents because it would create different kind of groups within the Department of Surgery. Now, other programs at our institution, ENT, do pay for these things. And so this became a point of contention when we started unionizing, and I'll talk briefly about that. Providing lead for your residents is essential. It's an OSHA requirement, and this becomes tricky also because when residents go to various institutions, they may have lead at your home institution, but they may not have lead at the VA that's readily available or at some of the private institutions. And so potentially purchasing lead for your residents that they can keep throughout their time as a resident can be important too. Chris Abuluraj talked earlier about the V-Score curriculum and having access to that, but there are a number of educational grants that you can get for things like books or lead or different program requirements. And I encourage you to do that. All of the major corporations give out educational grants that you apply for, and you can write what you want those funds to be used for. They can be used for educational conferences that you set up with visiting professors. They can be used to purchase any of the items that you see on this particular slide. And almost every program is doing some type of educational grant with industry or using the book programs that industry has. So Medtronic has a book program, Gore has a book program, and so does Cook. They have select titles that they give out as part of their educational mission, and residents can choose one book a year. The following slide is about unionization. And unionization is really a tricky situation. I can tell you that we are in the process of negotiating our union contract now for our residents. Our residents unionized 2 years ago, and we still don't have a contract. And it has become just this point of contention. And on the final slide that's next, you'll see there are two different things that are listed. The top is what, both of these came off the unionization website. And the top part is one organization and what residents at one organization got. So when they're unionizing, they're developing contracts and terms. So in this top organization, the union there at UCSF, they wanted 4 weeks of paid leave. They wanted all the housing stipend. They wanted, 24-hour fitness access. They wanted Kaplan discounts. But you can see in the bottom one is a different institution. And the things that they negotiated were dental insurance, vision, prescription prices, educational allowances. And so when it comes to unionization, it is really about each specific organization working through their contract. And it can be a good or bad thing. For our surgery residents, they actually got less of what they used to get because every residency now has to be fairly equal. So what the internal medicine residents get, the surgery residents also have to get. And it actually decreased the allowances that the surgery residents got because it now had to be on par with some of the other programs at the university. And that was a unique thing that they didn't really factor in. I don't think that unionization is essential. I think that a lot of times some of the things that these groups are working through are things that are generally provided, but maybe not to the scale at which they want. And it ultimately has not always been shown to bring in better conditions for some of the residents. So I'm going to stop there because I could go on and on for unique situations at each institution about how these various things can be interpreted or dealt with. But I think it's such a niche that it really can't be talked about in such a short amount of time.